Hello students, welcome to 6.2, Unit 6.2, Cognitive Development, where we'll be focusing on the development of our ability to think, process information, store memories in our brain, all of those great mental processes. So as we may have mentioned in class, as the developing child grows and matures, their experiences contribute to the rapid development of neural connections. For the first 5 years of life, your neural connections are multiplying at the fastest rate you will ever experience in your lifetime. We may have seen this picture before, or this graphic before, but this is just a great depiction of how quickly our neural connections develop in our brain for the first several years of our life. Remember, this is referred to as the critical period in terms of language acquisition. Habituation takes place as infants gain familiarity with repeated exposure to stimuli. They will become less interested in that particular stimuli. So if I give my son just one toy to play with, he'll play with it for probably about 15 seconds or about a minute maybe, and then he'll throw it down and he'll look for something to play with. Why is that? Because babies crave something new. They are always trying to learn about everything around them, so they will ignore stimuli they are familiar with and they feel comfortable with because they're constantly craving something new, because that's what grows neural connections. Craving things new, interacting with new stimuli, whether it's new sounds, new touches, new auditory sensations, new tastes. That's why babies are always putting things in their mouths, because they're always trying to learn something new. It's funny how we get older, there's a propensity to not be as inquisitive. For the rest of this unit, we're going to be focusing on this guy right here, whose name is Jean Piaget, who is a Swiss psychologist, even though his name is French, who is most famous for his breakthroughs in early childhood psychology. He is best known for his stages of cognitive development in children up into adulthood. All right. Do you guys remember that term schema from social psychology? A schema is a mental image, if you will, or it's a concept or framework that organizes and interprets information. In other words, it is the picture in your head that represents what you are thinking about at that time. It's a mental representation. Well, Jean Piaget came up with that. All right. So what are schemas? As we said, they are mental pictures, and schemas help us file and store information, and it helps us process information easier and faster. It's a way for our brain to save time, so we don't sit around contemplating one thing forever. Okay? Well, how do we change schemas? How do we adapt new schemas? There are two main concepts to this that are assimilation and accommodation. Assimilation, or to assimilate, is interpreting one's new experience in terms of one's existing schemas. So in other words, if your brain is a filing cabinet and our schemas are the files within that cabinet, then assimilation is the process of adding information to the file in the filing cabinet. So assimilation is just adding new information to a pre-existing schema. Okay? Accommodation is adapting one's current understandings to schemas to incorporate new information. So it's essentially creating a new schema, if you will. So accommodation, or to accommodate a schema, is using the filing cabinet analogy. Accommodation is when your experience or new information is too broad, or it contradicts your file, your pre-existing schema. So you create a new file, or you create a new schema to put in your filing cabinet or your brain. I know this is a little confusing. We'll go over this in more detail in class. Do not let me forget. All right. So as you're going to discover in this unit, Unit 6, Developmental Psychology, there are a lot of stage theories, and this is the first one we're going to explore. This is Jean Piaget's stage theory of cognitive development. And the first stage is the sensory motor stage. It lasts from birth up until about 2 years of age, and it's called the sensory motor stage because it is the stage where we experience the world through our senses and actions, looking, touching, putting things in our mouth. Think about babies constantly grabbing on things, putting things in their mouth. That's why it's called the sensory motor. All right, because we learn by touching and interacting through our sensory cortex and our motor cortex. This stage has several specific characteristics, such as object permanence. This is the awareness that things continue to exist even when not perceived. So if a baby is looking at a toy and then you take that toy away, because that baby's no longer looking at it, it no longer exists. If you take the baby out of the room from his parents no longer exists, okay? The baby does not develop object permanence until about the age of 2. This is when they begin to understand that things continue to exist even though they don't see them. All right, this is the whole premise behind Peekaboo. Remind me to show you guys these 2 videos in class. They're really funny. All right. Stage 2 of Piaget's cognitive theory is the preoperational stage. It lasts from about age 2 to age 6. It's called the preoperational stage because the child is too young to perform mental operations, like critical thinking, abstract reasoning, adding 1 plus 1, for example. So some of these mental operations that the child cannot perform is conservation. This is the principle that properties such as mass, volume, and the number remain the same despite changes in the forms of objects. So for example, the child in this stage thinks the taller glass of water has more volume simply because it appears larger. Once the child develops conservation, they will be able to identify that the volume is the same, and the development of conservation does not usually take place until stage 3, which is the concrete operational stage. But we're still in stage 2, though. All right. Toddlers and children in stage 2 also suffer from egocentrism. This is the child's inability to take another's point of view. So, for example, if you're watching TV, a preoperational child will feel comfortable sitting in front of you, which blocks your view of the TV. The preoperational child does not realize that your view is blocked because the child can still see the TV. The child can only see from his point of view, not yours. So, according to him, you can see just fine. Another concept associated with stage 2, preoperational stage, is the theory of mind. This is people's ideas about their own and others' mental states, like their feelings, perceptions, and thoughts. People like yourselves use theory of mind to predict or assume behaviors about others. For example, if you did something to upset your dad, you would have a good idea that he would be angry or perturbed at you. You would then predict that he would behave more sternly or strict with you. So you might start acting nice, or you might act extra affectionate just to avoid punishment from your father. This begins to take place in the preoperational stage, and this is why children are so kissy and suck up at this kind of age. All right. So this transitions us to stage 3, the concrete operational stage, and this lasts from about age 7 to age 11. It's called the concrete operational stage because children begin to grasp the fact that concrete materials do not change volume just because they change shape. This is when they develop conservation during the concrete operational stage. Children are able to think logically about concrete, also known as real or actual events and experiences. Typically, these events or experiences have to be in their direct vicinity or in their direct proximity. They can't contemplate hypotheticals, or they can't contemplate abstract thoughts. Concrete thinking is thinking about things only in immediate vicinity or sight. Comprehending analogies and examining or developing mathematical processes is well within their capability. That is something that these children are able to do, or they develop the skill at this point. Remember, they do develop conservation. All right, and that transitions us into the final stage, which is stage 4. It's the formal operational stage. We begin this stage at age 12, and it lasts throughout our entire life. This is where children begin the process, or begin reaching the process of the cognitive operational level of the formal or average adult. That's why it's called the formal operational stage. Children can now perceive beyond their immediate vicinity and can perceive hypothetical propositions and presume consequences to past, present, and future actions. So how do we continue to develop after stage 4? If we reach stage 4 by the age of 14, then are we just stuck at that cognitive state? Well, according to Jean Piaget, we continue to develop through the acquisition of knowledge. So after age 14, we have the ability to develop all these abstract reasoning skills, but how do we continue to develop? Knowledge acquisition. All right. So adolescence cognitive development. reasoning power. They don't have very good reasoning ability, and we've talked about this already, and this has to do with the lack of frontal lobe development. The neural networks in their frontal lobe are still developing because they still lack life experience, so they can't quite grasp the consequences to their actions quite yet, or they are in the process of learning these actions. Conservation is developed, and egocentrism is no longer a problem for most students, most teenagers, once they reach the formal operational stage. Adult cognitive development. Do adults lose their memory when they age? Do they become less intelligent as they age? Well, kind of, a little bit. Let's talk about that. Cross-sectional studies, which are studies where we compare different age groups. So we'll have a group of 20-year-olds, a group of 40-year-olds, and a group of 60-year-olds, and we'll study them independently, and we'll compare the results of all those studies. And these studies have shown that adults' memory and their intelligence do, in fact, tend to decline with age. Longitudinal studies show that that there is some intellectual stability. So in terms of in terms of critical thinking, in terms of abstract reasoning, that information, that cognitive ability declines with age. But in terms of our knowledge storage, our ability to store facts and to retrieve facts, that is an ability that we tend to have all the way up into late adulthood, up into 60, 70 years of age. All right, so this leads us to two different types of intelligence: crystallized intelligence and fluid intelligence. Crystallized intelligence is intelligence that solidifies over time. We're talking about facts. We're talking about, what year did Christopher Columbus sail the ocean blue? It was 1492. That is a fact. That is the type of intelligence we're talking about with crystallized intelligence, and this seems to get better with age. Whereas fluid intelligence, this is our abstract reasoning, critical thinking, hypothetical reasoning. That kind of fluid intelligence, that seems to decline with age, as we have learned from the cross-sectional and longitudinal studies. So here's an example of a cross-sectional study. So group 1 might be 20-year-olds, group 2 might be 40-year-olds, group 3 might be 60-year-olds, and then we compare their intelligence scores from these different age groups, and that shows us that there's a typical decline in fluid intelligence with age. But longitudinal studies over time have tend to show us that there is a solidification of factual knowledge, crystallized intelligence. So here's a chart of fluid intelligence, one ability to reason speedily and abstractly. This tends to decline with age in late adulthood, as we've discussed, and here it is compared with crystallized intelligence, which appears to increase or steadily plateau as we age. All right. So again, crystallized intelligence, one's accumulated knowledge and verbal skills, it tends to strengthen with age. And that sums it up. We are done.